Berg podcast. Thanks for joining us today. With me today is Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And Ford.
Hey, how's it going?
And we're talking a little bit about snow and somewhat about equipment and doing the job at hand with what you have.
Yeah, with what you have. And I mean,
and they kind of all go together, right?
They do.
Because snow, you think about.
Yeah, I mean, we're right there, right?
Yeah.
Like we've seen the weather change now. It got cold. By the time everybody listens to this, it's going to be brutal cold up here. We had to go out a couple times. Nothing really happened, which is, no fun in the sense of I'm not asking to plow 2 feet of snow, but I also don't want to just have guys sit there and wait because we all hate that.
Sure.
But, the shop, everybody got a dose of reality of what happens when it starts to snow.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The shop, Brad, Tom, everybody tried to talk and say, hey, you got to understand, all of a sudden a light switch is going to throw, and we're going to go from caring whether everything is running to what about that equipment that's been sitting out behind the shed for the last 7 months because we didn't need it, and right now we need all of it. And it's exactly what happened. The first storm, as they always did, they protected it was going to be a monster storm. Tom came up and Tom said, it's going to snow 7 inches. I was like, Tom, we'd be lucky if we get 1 inch. He was like, did you see the news? I was like, I saw it.
I know. Yeah, the news was crazy.
The news was, it was like Snowmageddon again. It was just ridiculous.
It went from less than an inch to more than 6 in a matter of 45 minutes. It was the weirdest thing in the world.
Yeah. I feel like with the weather, there's somebody. Well, first we should have been weather people. Ford, I know. Even more so. We got our first certified total, right? And we get it for it, and it says that there was freezing rain, a coating, and then some of the other places had 0.1. So if you don't have here's the thing about a measurable, like you said, if the column says measurement.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to, if you can't measure it, then fine, nothing happened. But if something happened, well, then
it would be a coating.
Yeah.
Right, but a coating has to, but it could be a fifth.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's 0.02, because there's a conversion, on that number.
Right.
And they're like, well, and I said, guys, it's not a big deal right now. But remember, we got to the end of last year, and all of a sudden you were like, well, I'm sorry, it's a shame, but you're a quarter of an inch lower than you need to be to hit the next tier. And it was like, well, so that quarter of an inch matters, doesn't it? And I said, now not only is the weather people struggle to predict,
sure,
but now these guys, their job is after the fact.
Right.
They're not, be clear, Brian, I don't know how much you know about this. Ford and I know way too much about it.
Yeah.
They're not sitting there with a ruler.
No. Yeah.
They melt it back down, and then there's some conversion about what the temperature and the barometric and all these things, and they factor it in. So it is measurable. Measure it. What is it? 0.02? So we should have been weathermen. But having said that, I also think that there's somebody standing in a grocery store, and they're relaying stuff back to the combination of the news and the milk, the dairy industry and grain industry. And they're like, okay, this is working. We're seeing a significant increase in bread and milk and egg purchases. And they're like, push it up to 4. And they push it to 4, people buy more bread and water. Right. Now water starts to go, now that whole industry kicks up. And let's push it to 6.
Yeah.
And I think then they hit a certain point that are we're at 8, and 7 to 8 really didn't, we saw no noticeable difference in sales. Yeah. And they just stopped there.
Yeah.
Okay, our work here is done. Everybody's got enough milk and bread to last them. It's going to go bad before they can use it.
Yeah. And they can't go too wild. They can't be 17. The generator people start to get involved, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Then you got to draw the generator people in.
Oh, you might need a generator.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Fuel prices. Everybody's going to have to call the oil companies.
Go fill all your tanks.
Yeah. Fill your tanks.
Yeah.
It's, so I think there's a market there that the weather's just working towards it. What's the perfect? I think they'll buy 6 inches.
Everyone's got a message and something to sell. So yeah.
Meanwhile, we're up
it's
way north. It snows 2 feet. Nobody even cares.
I feel like this is like the NFL right now, right? They're all trying to sell food. Isn't that the commercial?
Yeah, that's the commercial.
All the commercials. The NFL is just trying to sell food.
I'm unclear on what they're trying to sell right now because I can't. We have an internal thing, not internal to the office anymore, but with a bunch of the office guys. And for trying to pick games right now, it used to be pretty easy when you're just picking heads up. Are the Jets going to beat the Bills? Absolutely not. Now I'm no. I have to pick the Bills, but I feel like there's a significant chance they could lose. They already lost to the Dolphins. Cleveland now wins. I can't even keep up. There's not even any rhyme or reason how anybody wins or loses anymore.
Yeah.
I don't understand all the gambling part of it because I've never been involved in it. But the reality is, I think the bigger the spread, when you see them playing the worst teams, you just go ahead and almost bet the opposite side because there's just no way that some of these games you're just sitting there going okay, someone that's close to them that should be a good game, they kill them. And then there's this game that they should be done by halftime. and all of a sudden, like, you know, the 15th place team all of a sudden does good. You're like,
Yep.
what on earth is going on here?
I can't figure it out.
No.
So we didn't talk about snow at all, you know, but so we were out. We were out this week.
We went out for snow. We didn't really get snow.
Yeah, we didn't really get snow. I mean, there was some snow in the air. It actually snowed more, I think, on Sunday when they didn't call us in than on Tuesday when they did. But we had a bunch of guys out, and they were out early, as is always the case. You know, they had to be out 3 o'clock in the morning on the site, 3:30, between 3 and 4.
Yeah.
So I mean, you're talking about people leaving their house at 2, leaving their families at times they don't normally leave them. And the guys went out and they did a great job. You know, we were at 2 of our sites, and we had a bunch of guys out there. I mean, it was the usual suspects sort of for us. You know what I mean? I know, you know, I know at the way it sort of breaks out for us. You know, guys, one of the sites, a lot of special project guys are on. You know, Scott's team will be out there, and I saw Scott out there. Went and talked to a few of the guys, and then I went over and Brad was on the other site. Went over and talked to Brad and saw some of the guys there. You know, and so part of this we thought about was we could just call them out because, you know, they went out. Some of the guys, not all of them, but I mean, we probably had 10 on one site and maybe 8 on another, maybe 12 and 8, something like that. Yeah. And just sort of identify those guys. We don't like to talk about where the job is exactly. We don't like to talk about who we're working for exactly. It's just not good business.
Yeah.
But, you know, our team was out there. You know, I was out when I was at both sites. At the one site, I saw Brad, and Brad came up and talked to me for a while. You know, I saw Paulie was there, Mike Worth was there, Jack Hopta was there, you know, and their teams were there. You were, I was talking to you about some of the guys that were at our other site where Scott was.
Yeah, that was like Joe Stoffer and Levi, Luke and Trey. I think Anthony out.
Yeah, Anthony ran out there
Scott.
as well.
Yeah.
Yep, with Scott. He's done it before, but it's, you know, first time really doing it for us.
Yeah.
And we had some of the guys that traditionally do landfill were out there. You know, Robbie was out there.
Yep.
Wyatt Dry was out there.
Yeah.
You know, we had a few other guys.
Tony and Matt. And Matt were out.
Yeah, Tony and Matt were out there. So we had Kyle was out of the shop, so Kyle was running. Don Hunter Jr. was running. Yeah. You know, I'm missing guys. They'll come to me as I go. Yeah. But I saw them out there. There was a funny interaction between Dylan Clemens, who was out there, and Mike Worth and I. So they were trying to start one of the old wheel loaders, and they're getting ready to turn it over. Not starting it yet. Like Mike's heating up the glow plugs and everything, you know, doing everything he's got to do to start it. And he's getting ready to start it. And he looks at Dylan. He's like, "We're going to see." And Dylan said, "So that old thing," and Mike's like, you gotta give it a chance. The dinosaur will start up, and then Dylan said a dinosaur will start up. I was like, all right, let's take it easy on Mike here. Come on now. Mike's already up and running. Look at him. He's running around.
Here he is.
Mike was like, come on now.
That's awesome. I think it's cool that's not something we've done before. We've never like really acknowledged the folks who were out in a snowstorm. And this wasn't obviously the worst of our snowstorms.
No, it was
but
mild.
But I think it's a cool thing to do because snow is important to us. It provides a little bit of, at times, consistency over the winter hours for guys when some of our other jobs may or may not be running full bore. And I think that, you know, that kind of gets like lost, I think, at times in all of the things that we do for 9 months out of the year. Yeah. So, you know, 9 months out of the year, the weather is pretty consistent. You know, I'm not talking about the torrential downpours we had in May and June, but like otherwise pretty consistent. And sort of this is the anomaly. This is the exception. We're going to go do work when it's just, we know it's going to be miserable outside.
Yeah. So, and I mean, part of that beyond that is, and Ford has always said this, and I don't know how, we used to say it pretty openly. We just don't, the interactions aren't quite the same or with all the people, you know, but Ford and I always felt like it was a proving ground. You know, like in other words, it's, you go out there and you gotta show up, right, and you gotta take the equipment you have,
right,
and have to deliver a solution. There's no calling and saying, hey, we can't get this, you know, we're going to need to push a couple days here. We're going to need to get this equipment repaired, or, you know, we're going to have to shut it down. You know, the air conditioner is not working. The GPS doesn't work. None of that. It doesn't matter. You could start with a wheel loader with the nicest pusher on it and a heated cab and a radio, and you're sitting in there in your t-shirt. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And you could end up with a broken shovel pushing the sidewalk. and throwing salt out of a bucket, because at the end of the day, we have to get to the finish line. There's no other option.
Well, and
that has happened. That's not a possibility. That's definitely happened.
Yeah.
Well, and you have to get the job done, right? I mean, there is no alternative.
And you have to get it done today.
Yeah, and within
a couple hours of it stopping snowing, it has to be done.
Yeah.
You might have to go back and tinker with some things, and I think that is a big piece of what is different from our normal work.
Sure.
Very, very rarely do we end up in that spot. Now it happens, emergency work, or if you're in the road, or sometimes we do landfill work and we got one little piece and we got to close it up.
Right.
And once you get to that point, it doesn't matter what happens; it has to happen today.
Mm-hmm.
But with our snow work, that's every time. Every time is that, and so it becomes sort of this proving ground. And we get through it, you know what I mean? And you live and you learn. We got, and we had some guys who have not done it for us before. You know what I mean? Don Hill was out there. Daniel Suleiman was out there.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Dahl was out there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still missing a couple more guys that were out there. And they haven't been out there for us before because they're new to the company and we're trying to feel it out. And,
sure.
They get to see a little taste of it, but we go out there and immediately, I tried to talk to Scott, and Scott was pretty positive because he's Scott, and I talked to Levi, and Levi said, how's everything going? What's running? And we didn't really need a whole lot to run.
Sure.
Just certain things. And for the most part it was, but he was at the point with rain that he was testing stuff. So he was telling me what wasn't working. And then I talked to Brad before I headed over to Brad, and he was like, I don't even want to talk about it. I don't even want to talk about it because it was something that we knew wasn't going to work. One of the sidewalk machines, and it's one of the ones that has to work, or else you have to do it a different way. And the guys did it the other way, but immediately people were upset because it's not, we had to do it harder, but it makes everybody realize it. It also, I think we've lost a little bit for it. I don't know if you feel this way. We've lost a little bit of the appreciation of the equipment because in the infancy stages of when we did this, when we were the biggest we ever were in snow, we didn't have this kind of equipment. Like those pushers that we have that are old now rolled off the truck that year. We started without them, but more so the sidewalks. I mean, we used to do the sidewalks with a bucket and you would chicken feed it. Like that's how we did them. So when you gave us a machine, you didn't have to, everybody was thrilled.
Mm-hmm.
Now the machine running correctly is the expectation.
Sure.
And so if they have to do it the other way, it's a real inconvenience. You know what I mean? And so there's a change there. There's a change between how we used to run and what people are now accustomed to.
What felt like a gift at the time, it now feels like the way it has to be. Otherwise, you're not. How can the expectation to do the work be the same?
Right. How can it be the same? And I think we see that in in a lot of things. I think that when we went into it, I know when I got here, and I'm not going to speak for Ford when Ford started it, but when I got here, any new piece of equipment we got, and I don't mean new like new, right? Like let's not take
new
my
to
words.
us. That was the fancy term for it.
Yeah, new to us. Yeah. Anything that we got that we didn't have was a benefit. I mean, I remember going back when we were doing the treatment plant, and we brought in a track co-operator. He was a really solid guy. We've talked about it. He was here with us a little bit.
Yeah.
And he was completely capable, and we said, okay. He said, yeah, I'm going to go up there. Just get me to the track co. I'll get myself situated, be ready to go. We brought him up there. I drive him up to the top. We can do it with this Traco? And I was like, yeah, that's the bulk Traco. He was like,
that's the biggest thing we have.
That's the biggest machine we have. And he was like, that's a 321 with no tail. And I was like, yeah. He's like, you want to move 200,000 yards in rock with a 321 with no tail? I was like, that's the biggest Traco we have. Like, that's it. That's what's going to move. And it did. It moved it.
It moved it. Right.
And we moved it at a time that hit production rates that Steve had built.
You remember the client being like, oh, you can't do that. And he was like up there timing us because he was like going to try and tell us off, and then realized that
we were actually
still hitting the production that he thought we were supposed to.
If anything, we got in trouble for going a little too quickly.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Ford, Ford, I saw Squirmo this week.
Yeah.
I saw Squirm and Bobby this week because it snowed. So when it snows, certain people are not around, certain people are. I saw Squirm, and I called Justin, and I told him I was about to draw something on Squirm's windshield, but I refrained for it because I didn't know which windshield was Squirm's, and I didn't want to get in trouble. So it was a reference that Ford and some of the guys who have been here a while, and then Justin and Squirm, if they happen to hear it, they'll know the reference to back in the snowstorm. Squirm, we talk about the relationships that get built there.
Yeah.
And Squirm made a nice pictogram on what he thought was Justin's windshield. It was the Union guy's windshield, who was very unhappy. And he wanted to Squirm off. It was a whole thing. And before, do you remember that I told the guy to his face, I said, my dad's Union. I said, if my dad found out that you were upset about this picture, you probably get kicked out of the Union for it. I said, we got to be a little tougher than that. But it wasn't about that. It was about a non-union company working on a site with union guys. And then we immediately crossed the line that would have been funny if we were union, not so funny.
Not so funny. Because
you're not.
Yeah.
So, but
I think that as you're talking about it, the reality is we told the story before, but just, when we started, we had that one 314, not the one we currently have, but, and literally it did everything. It did everything from grading to, we had, at that point, we were kind of like just a special projects crew. But we were doing bigger jobs. You just used what you had. And as we've grown, we've been able to get more options. But then you also go to a job site and you might see pieces sitting because they need it for one special thing. And before it was I remember the 314 had a blade on the front of it. And so if you had to cut something at an angle, you would use the blade to tilt the, Is it proper? Absolutely not. Because, your frame's not on the ground. But if you needed to cut a slope, that's what you did. You used the blade to get you to the angle you needed. And then you just cut the slope with it. And I remember then we got a second 314. It was actually a Cabelco ED 150. And had a blade on it and all this stuff. And we were using that some too. But no, it's an interesting dynamic that, it's all this, the sidewalk machines. We get them to try and make it easier and to reduce the wear and tear on our team. But it does sometimes, you forget that was the OG way of doing it, was a plastic shovel that by the end of the storm was half worn down and, half the plastic was missing off of it. Or, you go to grab a shovel and 3 of them have metal edges on them and 6 of them don't still. You're just grabbing what you can get.
Yeah, it's
because that's how you did it. Or the 5-gallon bucket and your hand starts hurting because the salt was drying out your hand because you're trying to quickly finish something up.
Yeah, well, and it speaks, it just tells the story that I really wanted to talk about, right? I appreciate everybody being out there because it's not the ideal conditions. It's not what we normally do, And I thought of a couple of the other guys I forgot was Josh Neathammer was out there, and Mark Wiley was out there. Yeah. But so I think I have everybody. I think I said Zach, right? So I think I got everybody.
We're gonna miss somebody.
I'm gonna miss somebody. And I'm sorry, guys, but I appreciate it. But when you go out, Ford's not joking. I wish we had saved some of the shovels that we would shovel. They looked like they were the little skinny shovels. They had maybe 6 inches of blade, and they were 18-inch shovels. We would just wear them down because there was no other choice. And Ford and I would always end up shoveling. At the end of the day, we would work our way down from a machine to a truck to a something to a shovel to a bucket. You know what I mean? Because it was almost like a finish line for me. If we could get to the point where Ford and I were holding a shovel and throwing salt, that means everything's almost done. The only step left is for me to go argue with the owner so we can leave and get everybody home. That was it. Yeah. But if I'm still in a machine or still in a truck, well, we're nowhere near done. Right. So I didn't look at it that way. But something else Ford said that really, I'm trying to figure out how to frame it. But when the 314 was the only machine he had, 314 had to run. 314 had to be maintained. It had to be greased. It had to check the oil and check the fluids. Because if the 314 stopped, you either went home, and in the old days, Bergs don't go home, right? Berg construction, we don't go home. We'll finish it one way or another. That means you're using something else and you don't have anything else. So now you're talking about using a skid loader or a shovel or maybe a mini. You know what I mean? It's not good. And that's not a good option. So you want it to run. And I think that somewhere along the way, with all the new equipment and all the fancy tools and NCONs and, you drive on a site and it looks amazing. It looks so cool when we line up our equipment on a job site. But when you have that many pieces, I think somewhere along the way we lost a little bit of taking care of the equipment, because if it wasn't running quite right, that's all right. I'll just switch track hose. I'm not singling Gary out for damage or for not taking care of equipment, but Gary's notorious for holding equipment, and he has such a big job that Gary could have the 490, a 290, he would have a 61, 251s, 4 trucks, and he needed them when he needed them. But when he didn't need them, if it was okay. If the 490 wasn't working, we'll just load with the 290. And then you get the 490 fixed in a couple of days, I'll be fine. But if the 290 or 490 was all you had, you better make sure it runs. Mm-hmm. And then a little bit of a different piece that Ford and I talked about comes with that too is for the first, I remember when we bought the 490, and for the amount of negotiating I did with Komatsu for a way out of that machine, I was so nervous that we would buy it and not be able to use it to get enough work to offset the cost, right? Then even though I didn't used to think that way, and you and I, we've had that discussion.
Sure.
I still knew, like, I can't buy a machine that expensive. I mean, that thing was 2 to 3 times bigger than anything we owned. And so I negotiated all these outs for us in it. And we ran that machine, nothing ran like the 490. I mean, it ran constantly. And I really do genuinely believe that for the first 8,000 hours of that machine, somebody might have run it other than Chad for maybe 100 hours. Maybe. I mean, like, I've run that machine maybe 6 hours ever. Ford's run it some. Justin Boyer ran it some. And maybe I'm off. Maybe in 8,000, maybe it's 500 hours.
Yeah.
But that machine looked like a new car. You know what I mean? Like, it was because Chad didn't mess up his machine, and he took care of it. And he didn't, and in our desire to be fluid and to be able to easily switch and get equipment to people when they need it, it jumps around. And in that, we need to work. I mean, it's going to be an effort. It is not going to be easy to work as a team and maintain our equipment and keep it running.
Yeah.
But when something breaks, I'm going to be careful here for it, and I want you to sort of I'm going to give you the rope for it, right? But if something breaks because you broke it, right? You broke a mirror, you rip a tooth off a bucket, you do something that damages it. That's bad, and it breaks.
Sure.
But what we see a lot lately is things breaking that shouldn't break, right? Like, diesel motors by nature are made to run. They will run forever if you just take care of them. They will run a significant lifespan. 490 being a great example. Right? That 490 had no significant troubles with anything in how it ran, its operation, other than maintenance, for 8,000 or 9,000 hours. Right? Like, I mean, think 8,000 or 9,000 hours, that thing ran perfect. Lately, we've seen a couple motors blow early, right? Now, I don't want to be negative about it, but diesel motors don't blow. Like, somebody didn't do something. And we had a couple people that we got rid of, and one of them that sticks in my mind, I'm not going to single them out, but one of them, they checked the truck after he drove it. And Ford, do you remember that truck was quart slow? I mean, like, not 1 quart, not 2 quarts. Like, it had almost no oil in it. And it was like, well, guess what's going to happen? You know what I mean? Someone's going to drive that truck, and one day that truck's motor is going to go.
Right. Yeah.
And the reason it's going to go is because that guy did that 5 years ago. And so it's important that you take care of your equipment, because if you don't, you just go down. It goes downhill from there. You're going to find yourself ending up with a shovel. And I mean that sort of tongue in cheek, but also not. Like, we got to get the work done. It may not be you that ends up with a shovel, but somebody.
It's interesting because I think that, like, I think a lot of people, and maybe this isn't true. I'm just like trying to think about it myself personally. Like, I think you treat the things you own generally better than the things that you rent.
Yep.
Right. So I'm just thinking about, like, if I'm traveling and I rent a car, I'm not saying I beat the thing, but I don't exactly like take the trash out at every gas station and stuff like that. And by the end of my trip, I know that, like, they're going to vacuum it out, right? They're going to pull the trash out of the door cards or whatever. And
it's a great point.
And I'm like, man, with my stuff though, every time I get to the gas station, I take the trash out of the cup holder or whatever.
Yep.
And I think that we at times get caught in that rental type mentality, even with stuff that we own, because we're passing it around.
Yep.
And what happens, I think, and I could be wrong, I'd love to hear about it if I am, because I don't want to have some misconceived perception, but I think that there's always like, well, the next guy will do the inspection. The next guy will make sure that the oil's topped off. The next guy will grease it. The next guy will.
Well, I even think further than that, Brian, that if you lent Gavin or Eden a car,
sure,
and they drove it for 3 months and they brought it back and it was scratched up and beat up and all dirty, you'd clean it up as best you could, but you would only get it to a point of where it is. From that point, the expectation would only be to reach that.
Right.
And so I think the pass around problem is that by the time it may get back to, even if it made it back to the person that started with it, it's significantly more beat up than it was when it started. And so the expectation is that point. And we had a really funny conversation. I don't remember who I was talking to yesterday about it. It might have been Brandon. But I think it was Brandon, because Brandon didn't even know this. But what I was really talking about was PU12. It was PU12, and it was the 3 Yukons ago, right? At one point, we had both of those. Gary drove 12, Gary still had 12. And I think Gene Razor, I think Gene might have had the Yukon that was 2 behind the white Yukon, right?
Yeah.
So I think Gene had the Yukon and Gary had 12. And those were still meticulously kept. The reason they were kept that way was because Ford and I were standing here and people were driving our vehicles. Like in their mind, they were driving our vehicle. Like the same way when I'm fortunate enough to inherit one of Ford's vehicles, I take care of it as close as I can to how Ford took care of it, because I want Ford to see that, like, hey, I have your thing and I'm taking care of it. But if we just put a car in the lot and we said, hey, whoever needs to use that car,
Yeah.
even you and I, like, we're not making us better than anybody. We wouldn't take care of it the same way.
Sure.
Because I could get in and, like, the first couple times that you left trash in the car or I left trash in the car, the other one would clean it up. But if every time you got in there, you had to clean up the trash I left in there, you'd probably talk to me about it. But what if there was 4 of us? Now who are you going to talk to?
I think about...
and that's, I think, right where you are, where your description is dead on, is that scenario.
Well, and I think we had a pickup in the fleet for a while. I don't think it is anymore. Or maybe it's on its way out of the fleet.
It's on its way out.
21, I think.
Yep.
And 21 was one like that. It got kind of shared, right? It was not always assigned to an individual. And I think what you're talking about a little bit with, like, where you find it, it sort of establishes the bar of where you feel like
the best you're going to return it.
Yeah. And, I remember getting into that a couple of times, and, like, the floor mats are caked in mud and like stuff like that. And you're like, well, am I going to be the one who now takes the time to, like, pull them out and spray them down and wash them off and get the dust out? And you're kind of like, man, that was not part of my plan for the afternoon. Right. And so, I definitely
and it still works. And I mean, and 12 is a great example for me.
Sure.
Because 12, we literally rusted that bed off that truck.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it saw so much salt.
Yeah.
And I mean, the things that it's plowed and the mistakes I've made, frankly, like, I mean, I've hit a couple things plowing with 12, you know what I mean? Like, if anybody out there that's listening, if you happen to be with Paulie, ask Paulie about 8 Lee Boulevard and that truck. There was a giant snowstorm, and Paulie's Paulie, right? Like, Paulie's like, we cannot plow. We have no idea where this new lot is. We have no idea how to get in or out. I'm not going in there with a wheel loader. I'm going to break something. And I was like, Paulie, this has to get done. We're either going to shovel this curb line or we're going to find the parking lot. And so I think someone went from the other side and they shoveled so I could see where the curb cut went out. And so I was at the far end of the parking lot. I blasted right through the middle. And Paulie's got a video of the snow coming over the roof of 12. And 12's a big truck.
Sure.
It's coming over the roof of the truck. I'm moving. I am not plowing at 5 miles an hour, as Tom would advise. And I can see where it's going. And it was a curve. It was not a straight run out of that parking lot. And so I caught a curve and it, like, bounced me around it. You know, so I mean, 12 did not have an easy life dealing with me. You know what I mean? But because we mechanically took care of it, because we changed the oils, we checked the oils, we checked the fluids, we, you know what I mean, did everything we needed to do. We washed it out as best we could when we put tons of salt into it. You know what I mean? 12 lasted. You know what I mean? And 12, they just put, I mean, I think 12 has 280,000 miles on it. And we just put a new bed on it because the truck's still mechanically
so good.
Diesel motors don't break. You know what I mean? And so it was really like a touchstone for me as I was talking about it to the guys, because I was like, this is an easy sell for me. If you take care of stuff, it takes care of you. And if you don't, you're going to find yourself shoveling.
Yeah.
Because not as a punishment.
Part of this is, like, I don't know, everything nowadays, like, the construction industry always talk about countercultural, but it's countercultural with this equipment too, because everything nowadays is made, like we were talking about it the other day.
All disposable.
You know,
man.
Everything's made for disposal. Like, like right now we have a dryer that's not working, and, like, instead of being able to fix it, the recommendation is just buy a new one, right? Or, different things. That is literally everything at this point. Trying to find something of quality, but this big equipment is a different game because it's got to run 10,000 hours in order to pay for itself. Like, it needs to, wear parts. Yeah. Hey, teeth, tracks, all that kind of stuff. That's part of life. But the other stuff is not part of life. And, part of it is too, like all the toys that we have, the technology, the GPSs and stuff, like, they are to be a tool, to be helpful, but the machine will still work without it. Like, it'll still dig a hole without it. You might have to have a labor with a grade stick or something or some other thing, but it still does work as long as it's functional and it is mechanically sound and safe. Like they're different things as far as, I think we told that story. The guy that was trying to air condition the world out of a D6 cab many years ago. Yeah. And it's not getting cold. Well, the doors need to be closed because the filters will blow up, or, all that kind of stuff. And so some of it is, if you buy, look, how many troubles have we had in the shop with our vehicles, because you can't even get parts for them anymore. They just want to push you to getting something new. And it's like, we were joking about it. Like the only way, we've done some of those rebuilds on stuff because the older stuff, we like the way it was built, or we like the style of the machine or whatever it is. And the only way they're going to stop us from doing that is if you can't get parts to fix them. Yeah. But heavy equipment is built for parts. I mean, you can get bigger than the stuff we have, and you're talking, quarry size wheel loaders and stuff. They're supposed to do 30, 60,000 hours with those machines. Like they're built to last that long. They're not built to use for 2 seasons and send them on to the next market.
Yeah.
No, it's all true, and it's all there. And I'm not trying to beat anybody up. I'm trying to make sure that it gets really hard to run this business. And I don't mean Berg. I mean to run these kind of companies, this type of business, when things that you don't account for going wrong, go wrong. Right? Like it's not there. The mistake is, the issue is big when it's some of those things. And so be clear. I happily accepted Cooper wearing the tracks off of 61s for 5 years. It didn't even bother me, Brian. I mean, I think he burned 2 undercarriages. Shouldn't have even gone through 1. But Cooper worked. He was trying. He was trying to do what he saw Greg do with the machine, and he had to learn the ability and the skill to be able to do that. And the cost of that was an undercarriage, right? But that's him trying, right? Where I want to be clear, what I'm talking about is I want to make sure that the guys do what needs to be done to make sure the equipment runs. If we're still, if there's a younger guy in a piece of equipment or a girl, we got women in the field now, right? Brianna's around, and there's a couple others. If you're in a piece of equipment and you do, everything's greased and the fluids are perfect, and there's, you're dumping out, there's no water in the fuel, you're doing everything you're going to do, and you're like, hey, I broke a tooth. Like, hey, what are you going to do? That happens. You know what I mean? Even bigger. You know what I mean? I wore the bucket out. We were running on this job. It was rock. I wore the bucket out. We're going to need to replay. Okay. Like that's something we didn't account for it, but like, hey, you're trying. But what I want to make sure I get out there is I want everybody to focus and realize that I need you to do the trying part. You know what I mean? And I need you to do the minimum. When Paulie or, Greg or Ed back in the day, they showed up, and I'm just picking 3 guys that I think of that I would get there when I used to show up at jobs early because I was working, right? I was trying to help. You'd see I'd see them greasing fittings I didn't even know existed. You know what I mean? Because they made sure every fitting was greased. You know what I mean? They made sure there wasn't mud in the tracks and mud in the pan. They did all these things that didn't make them run any better that day, but it made them run better 5 years later. Yeah. You know what I mean? And we need to make sure that we keep doing that, because it's those things that add up that make the equipment be able to work for you, that make the business viable. Yeah. And so
I think it's just an important message. Keep the bar high. Don't settle in for the lowest common denominator. Right. Yeah. So, yeah.
And appreciate the equipment. Like going back to that, we started with buckets, right? Yeah. Like appreciate them when you show up on a job. There's a 490. The 490 might not be as young as it was when Chad first stepped into it brand new.
Sure.
But guess what? I assure you that if it's running, it's going to be much easier to run than the 321. You know what I mean? 321, it's like taking teaspoons compared to that 490. So appreciate that that's where we are. Appreciate, that. And it's, something else that and I don't want to drag this way out. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but that still comes from that time that I think is almost like a marker, like a leading indicator that we could use to identify the behaviors that are going to yield somebody who really takes care of equipment is, you've driven with Ford. Mm-hmm. There can be a noise that is the smallest noise in your vehicle. And I can't make it off of California Road before Ford would call me out on it. Be like, yeah, you hear that noise? I'm like, what noise? And he's like, so first turn the radio down. Now let's listen to the truck. You know what I mean? Like, he's not that direct with me, but in Ford style, he is, right? Like, that's what he's really saying. He says, you're not even listening, because if something's making a noise that it shouldn't make,
sure,
well, there's a reason. And if there's a reason it's making the noise, it's not a good reason. You know what I mean? It's a bad reason. It's just a question of how bad. And so years of running equipment since he was young and not new equipment. Like, hey, we all know that this is Tom's son. Like, Tom is not known for going out and buying the brand new equipment, right? So they had to know, they had to feel it, they had to hear it. And that's why our equipment lasted so long back in the day, because everybody that worked around him, you'd better listen. Because if you didn't, as soon as he got on the piece of equipment, he was going to say, like, hold on, how long has it been making this noise? And you didn't want to say, well, I mean, long time. I just didn't tell you. I didn't think it mattered that you spent thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars on this machine.
Well, listening to it, feeling it, vibrations change, smelling, using all of your senses is really actually part of the situation too, because, all of those things, visual inspections, you get in it, you look at what the smoke's coming out of the engines, you feel vibration that you didn't feel before. And especially if you've been in, it's your first day in a new piece of equipment, you're not expected to know. But I mean, once you've been in the same machine for a week, that machine becomes part of you, and you can feel if something isn't right, or if you feel the power's lagging. Like, you're not going to know that on day one, but by the end of the week, you should be able to feel if there's been any alteration or variation from previous, because those are the small things. When you catch things small, they usually are small. It's when they continue on, that's when they start to expand and become bigger challenges.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'm glad we got to have this conversation. I mean, I wanted to make sure we talked. Ford had said, like, let's talk about snow. Let's talk about guys that go out and did it.
Yeah.
And we did that. But I also wanted to drive to have this conversation. And I didn't know how we'd get to the point we just got to, but it's where I wanted to try and get. Because the most important thing to me out of this is you realize we talk about culture all the time. And we talk about culture, get it done, right? We talk about culture, find solutions, act like an owner. We have all the things, and I believe in those. But I think one of the ones that we've sort of not talked about enough and lost is that exact thing of Ford. Is that Ford would always solve a little problem while it's little. You know what I mean? In our equipment. Like, don't let it be a big problem. When you don't report, something, and you don't ask for it to be fixed, or the mechanics don't fix it. Like, I'm not putting it on any one group in one cog in the wheel here. When it doesn't get done, something worse happens. And Brad, we had something where the guys reported that they put in a maintenance repair, that the mirrors were going off of a Traco. And I was aggravated because that's not a wear item, right? Like, the mirror didn't wear out.
Sure.
Somebody broke it off on something, which means it hit something, which is an incident report, because then we could say, like, hey, what happened? Did somebody, all those things. But when Brad heard about it, you know what Brad said? Brad said, what I'm worried about is with no mirrors on it, how long has it had no mirrors? What if someone spun and killed somebody with that thing? Like, then now we're making the phone call that we always want to avoid, and you got someone who killed somebody with a machine because you broke a mirror off and didn't report it. You know what I mean? Like, fix the little thing while it's little. Nobody's going to get their head chopped off for breaking a mirror. Sure. I mean, you can't break 5 mirrors. You need to be more careful than that. But
can't keep
you know what I mean? But not telling me doesn't make you not have broken the mirror.
Right.
And it's certainly with the foremen doing their jobs and superintendents and PMs, you break 3 mirrors, everybody's going to know. You know what I mean? The people that need to know are going to know, and they're going to question, you know what I mean, if it's a good idea to let you run a piece of equipment, because a mirror today could be a person tomorrow.
Yeah.
So we got where I was hoping to get.
Good.
I didn't want it to, I always let you open and close it, but I didn't want this to be a negative thing, but I wanted people to be able to maybe get a sense of where we came from with a culture piece that we don't talk about a lot, which is Ford and the Bergs growing up using whatever equipment they had, and it always kept running because they took care of the equipment. And when Ford always said it, he doesn't say it much anymore, but when you take care of your equipment, it takes care of you.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like it wraps it up. So thanks for joining us today, folks. We hope you got something from this, and we hope you come back for another episode.